How you going? Jim Rowan here. Oh, I did that backwards. Jim Rowan, how you going? Whatever. Maybe that sounds better. How you going? It's Jim Oh. Yeah, it still rhymes. That's all that really matters, right? Is an intro that rhymes. I don't care. Look, I'm gonna follow up from my podcast from last week, wherein we talked about the Enochiism era. But it is the 23rd. It is Saturday. It is nighttime. And again, it's dark, so the weather's nice, I guess. It's not raining or anything. It was a hot day today. I went to the beach. I got burned. Let's not go into it. Um, but yes, I'd like to follow up on my recording from last Friday evening, I believe it was. I talked about 1997 through 2005. I've also been posting articles, by the way, with a bit more detail to do with the rivalry that kicked that entire era off, I believe, in Hashimoto versus Ogawa. So that's available at cagesideseats.net. And I will post the final part of that story. There's three parts. I've posted two of them already. I'll post a third part this weekend. I've got some time off this weekend, so I'll be sure to do it. But I think the last part is the best part. I mean, the first two parts cover the real history of the rivalry, but the last part covers the kind of the effects on the business and of the two people personally. I feel like the last part's the best part, but I haven't gone back over it to edit it yet. I mean, it's sitting there, it's nearly ready to go. I just have to go through it, make sure it's ready to go. But that's a different topic. I want to kind of keep these relatively brief and easy to easy to digest. The same way I have digested a couple of beers tonight, so that might play a part in how I'm able to speak. Not that I've had an awful lot, but I had a big break. I haven't had a drink since the new year, so they're hitting me a bit more than they might otherwise. Anyway, once again, this one's going to be about 2006. It to me is a transitional year, and I want to cover this year in some detail in order to set up what I want to do moving forward, which is to cover what I believe is the beginning of an era moving forward. But I think in a bit more detail to finish that sentence. But I think, like I said, 2006 is a transitional year, so there's information in this podcast that will be very much relevant to the series that I'm planning on continuing from here. And I suppose maybe I should go back a little bit, because the last podcast ended with Brock Lesnar winning the IWGP Championship. And in my opinion, Brock Lesnar is a really important figure in this transitional period of New Japan Pro Wrestling. So that was back on October 8th, 2005. And what I don't think I did mention in the last podcast was that, according to my research anyway, Riki Choshu booked this shit. So it was Brock Lesnar in his debut in the Tokyo Dome against Fujita, who was the champion, and Masahiro Chono, who, of course, is a legend at this point. And Lesnar beats Chono. And that begins the Brock Lesnar IWGP title reign. And this is with, for the belt nerds out there, this is with the third incarnation of the IWGP Championship belt, which, funnily enough, I kind of liken to the WWF/WWE Undisputed Championship that came about in 2002. It's kind of that slimish, ovalish, gold title it was WWF at first, but it survived the transition, and then they brought back the World Heavyweight Championship anyway, and so that undisputed belt became the SmackDown belt because that's when they did the roster split, and the Eric Bischoff was general manager of Raw, if I'm remembering this correctly, and he awarded Triple H the World Heavyweight Championship to be the top star on Raw. But Brock Lesnar was on SmackDown, so he, I don't know, I feel like he's one of the main people associated with this Undisputed Championship, which, by the way, again, as a belt nerd, one of my favorite belts. One of my favorite belts. Really pretty belt, the Undisputed title. I would go as far as purchasing one of these things to be an ultra nerd, but I would only purchase the WWF version. I don't want that WWE bullshit. I would get the WWF one, which lasted, I don't know, a matter of months. But still. Anyway, I digress. So Brock Lesnar's wearing the IWGP version of that belt. It's kind of, it wasn't around long, so it's interesting to note. Vegeta wore it out. Lesnar wore it. Vegeta wore it to the ring. Lesnar wore it from the ring. And then, of course, again, as I mentioned, in November, Ukes purchased New Japan Pro Wrestling, but Simon Inoki remained the president. Riki Choshu remained the head booker. And Brock Lesnar, of course, is the champion. So that brings us into 2006. And the first event of 2006 is, of course, the Tokyo Dome event on January 4th. It's called Tokon Shido Chapter 1. And it drew about 30,000 people as far as the records show. But, I mean, well, look, every year since the 90s, New Japan ran the Tokyo Dome 2 or 3 times a year, sometimes more than that. But 2006 was the first time that they'd only managed to be inside the Tokyo Dome once. And even that was just keeping up appearances, because from my research, only 10,000 people bought tickets to this show. So the other 2/3 were just wandering in for free, just to fill the place up, just so it wasn't empty looking. So that's the state of affairs in 2006. The biggest show of the year, they're begging for people to come. It's very much, I mean, I don't know. I guess some people might go back and go, well, Ukes took over in November 2005. That's the turning point. Eras are so hard to define, at least in specific terms. Like, where did it really start? It's always ingredients. It's always something that happens over time. It's not really always something that there's a specific catalyst or turning point for. So, yeah. Well, look, let's just move ahead. This is supposed to be our 2006. Let's talk about 2006. We're starting with the Tokyo Dome show. I would say there's two matches on this card that are significant moving forward. The first one is Katsuyori Shibata versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. So in the last podcast, I talked about, both of these guys, but mostly Tanahashi, I talked a little bit more about, I think, because I covered his 2002. He was really starting to become a bit of a star, like clearly someone they were looking at pushing. And then he had this stabbing incident with his girlfriend, and then he returned in early 2003, and that was to a bit of fanfare. And he became the what do they call it? That under 30 champion, whatever it is, the under 30 championship belt. He became champion of that. I mean, it was clearly just made for him. But so that's a little way back now. If we fast forward to 2006, I guess the point of me bringing this history up is that Tanahashi was someone that was very much seen as one of the next generation superstars. I mean, by this point, he was considered one of the three musketeers, or one of the three new musketeers. And so was Shibata. Of course, Shibata's got a very different style to Tanahashi, but he was considered the other star, the third star being, of course, Nakamura. But so these two fought in the Tokyo Dome 2006, and when you consider what I've just said, that these are two of the top young stars, you might think, well, the idea must be that they're going to have this kind of long classic match to put them both over. But that's not what this was. The match lasted about 15 minutes. And Shibata, and it's very much a styles clash, if you will. I mean, I don't know if you can hear that noise in the background. Once again, I've explained this before. I need to keep the window open or I will suffocate. If I put the fan on, you'll hear it. It sounds bad. This is the best we have. Hopefully no motorcycles go past this time. Anyway, Shibata is very much like more in the Inoki mold, in that he's a shooter. That's his style. Whereas Tanahashi is very much a traditional pro wrestler. And that's the clash they have here. Tanahashi wants to grapple with him. Shibata aggressively fights him off with rapid strikes and goes on to bully Tanahashi throughout this match. I mean, Tanahashi is persistent, if nothing else, but it is just these stiff kicks that drop Tanahashi. It gets to the point where the referee is begging Shibata to back off so that he can just count Tanahashi down, like doing the boxing 10 count, but Tanahashi just keeps getting back up. At the end, Tanahashi beats another count. He slowly gets to his feet. Shibata just cruises over, lands a couple more kicks to knock him out cold, and then wins by pinfall. It is basically a squash. It made Tanahashi look... I mean, not to say it wasn't a good match, by the way. I think that's important to note, because this is on New Japan World, if you want to go check it out. Tokyo Dome 2006. Go have a look. Watch Shibata beat the crap out of Tanahashi. That's what this is. But look, without getting too far ahead of ourselves in this one, I think the idea was to set up Tanahashi winning the next match they were to have. Which, that would have been cool. That would have been a cool rivalry. You really put over Shibata as this super tough dude that just beat the crap out of Tanahashi. And then you have Tanahashi, the underdog, work his way back up. Unfortunately, Shibata left the company. It was really shortly after this. He left for Big Mouth Loud was the name of the company, and they were kind of doing shoot style stuff at the time. And yeah, he wouldn't come back until 2012, which is way ahead of where we are now. But Hiroshi Tanahashi just would never get his revenge. Well, I shouldn't say never, but he just, when it mattered, he wouldn't get his revenge. And then look, I don't know that was the plan, of course. I'm just assuming, but yeah. Shibata beat the crap out of him. That's the summary of this match. And then the next match, or the main event, of course, Brock Lesnar with the IWGP Championship. He's defending that. He defends it against Shinsuke Nakamura. So we talked about Nakamura. A couple years prior to this, he won the IWGP Championship. Oh, sorry, no, he didn't win the IWGP Championship. He defended it and won the NWF Championship from Takayama in a pretty hype match. I mean, like a good fight, a good match, something I recommend to people. And here he is 2 years later, and he's just kind of, it's not a great match. It's not on New Japan World, this one. Nakamura just kind of comes in. He tries to be quick with strikes, but as soon as Lesnar gets a hold of him, it's kind of similar to the Shibata Tanahashi match in that sense, in that it is a styles clash. It does make Nakamura the striker versus the grappler in Lesnar. It's just, in this case, the grappler wins. Lesnar just, as soon as he gets a hold of him, just throws him around really roughly. There's a point in which Nakamura tries to dive outside the ring at Lesnar, but he wasn't ready, so Nakamura has to kind of stall, and it just creates this awkward moment. And then he does dive out, but seems to get the worst of his own dive. The referee wants him back in the ring. Nakamura goes for a flying armbar. The crowd are really behind Nakamura, like they don't want Lesnar to win. It's his second. It's his first defense. It's his second match in the company, I believe. And the crowd are already like, we don't want this guy. But he wins with the verdict, which is the F5. They called it the verdict because Lesnar had that lawsuit against the WWE. Because when he left the WWE, of course, he left to go play football, American football. And he had this, ridiculous no compete clause. I think it was supposed to be like 10 years, or absolutely ridiculous. So, and I mean, WWE still does that. It's just that most people don't have the money to fight it. But Lesnar had the money to fight it, and also had New Japan backing him up, and they had the money to fight it. So the verdict was that he could, ply his trade. He didn't have to stick to the ridiculous contract WWE signed him up to. A contract is a contract, but if you agree to let him go, then you agree to let him go. WWE, yeah, like I said, they've tried this a couple other times. I mean, I'm pretty sure Alberto Del Rio won this argument in court as well. But I think most people just can't afford to take him on, so WWE usually wins. Anyway, that's why his F5 is called the verdict in New Japan. But, yeah. It wasn't a bad match. I watched it. Lesnar versus Nakamura wasn't a bad match. It just wasn't a Tokyo Dome main event match. That's the issue. But anyway, so Brock Lesnar remains champion. Let's move ahead here. A little bit later in the month of January, Tanahashi makes his debut in the United States for TNA, which of course obviously is TNA debut as well. It's at Final Resolution. He loses to AJ Styles. He also had a match with Roderick Strong, who he beat, but that was taped for Explosion, which is like it was like the recap show at the time. February. On the 5th, Tanahashi defeated Nakamura before Nakamura leaves. Nakamura is about to leave on Excursion. I think he wrestles another time. So that was on the 5th. On the 12th, Tanahashi still has this openweight title. He defeats Yamamoto, which WWE fans, they would know him as Yoshitatsu. But yeah, this is just another defense of a title that, I mean, it makes sense on paper. It just never went anywhere. It was just a Tanahashi belt until he decided he didn't want it anymore, kind of. We'll get to that. It was the 19th of February when Nakamura actually wrestled his last match before leaving on Excursion. And he went to Mexico, Brazil, Russia, and then he went to train with Lesnar in Lesnar's personal gym, which means to me that he got on the gear, which, as long as he's doing it safely, good on him. I don't mind, whatever. And I don't know that that's the case, but he certainly came back bigger. And there actually was loans. There actually was rumors at this time of a loan move to WWE for Nakamura, but and they came from Simon Inoki, the bloody president, but nothing came of it. It wasn't the first time Simon Inoki was to be untrustworthy. And then it was the same show as that Nakamura final match that Tanahashi defeated Yuji Nagata, which is a big, big win for Tanahashi to beat a former world champion, or IWGP champion, if you want to get technical. Then in March, we haven't mentioned the junior title in a while. Tiger Mask defeated Minoru. And that was for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title and the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title. I believe Tiger won that, and then at some stage, probably in 2005, beat the champion, the IWGP champion, and unified the belts. Well, he didn't unify them, he just held both belts, but that was a thing for a while. And Minoru he's one of the top. He was called Heat at one point. He had a mask. He's like one of the top junior heavyweights in New Japan. But later that month, Brock Lesnar defended the IWGP Heavyweight Championship again, this time against Akabono, who was a sumo wrestling grand champion. And Antonio Inoki apparently had pushed for this match to be sumo rules, and Ukes, the new owners, vetoed that idea. So that's good. In April, we had the second ever New Japan Cup between the 16th of April and the 30th of April. The winner of this, of course, gets an opportunity at Lesnar's IWGP Championship. But the cup itself at this stage, there's no like prestige behind it or anything. Like I said, it's the second time it's appeared. So it's really just about the championship shot here, the title shot. So we had Giant Bernard. He defeated Yano, Choshu, Nakanishi, which was a rematch from the Tokyo Dome, because Bernard faced Nakanishi at the Tokyo Dome. And Bernard got to the final against Yuji Nagata. Nagata beating Tomohiro Ishii, Togi Makabe, and Tanahashi before the final. And in that final, Nagata fell to Bernard in a pretty good match between these guys. Bernard was really struggling to hoist Nagata up into the powerbomb because of leg damage he'd taken throughout the match. He finally hits it, but then Nagata kicks out, and it's a Bernard driver that finishes the match. The Bernard driver is like an over-the-shoulder, I guess it's a reverse pile driver. But over-the-shoulder, sit-out, pile driver. And yeah, Bernard beats Nagata. He gets his chance at Lesnar. He cuts a promo after the match. He calls this victory a dream come true. He says these fans are the best in the world. And this will sound familiar to some WWE fans. He says he doesn't mention Lesnar by name, but kind of unlike Lesnar, he says he'll be there to defend the title month in and month out, unlike the current champion. And what's interesting actually about this promo is that there's a Japanese translator that translates what Bernard is saying in blocks. So Bernard will kind of talk for, whatever it is, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then he'll pause and he'll let the translator explain what he said to the audience. I don't know why they don't do that now. I feel like that's a good idea. Okay, well, also in April, if we were to go back a little bit, we had Prince Devitt, who now is known as Finn Balor. In February of 2006, he defended the NWA British Commonwealth title against Hartley Jackson, and that was at the USA Dojo. Well, it was a joint event. The New Japan USA Dojo and NWA California were working together. And they had a couple more matches between them. But it was in April of 2006 that Devitt debuted in New Japan, the full New Japan, the Japanese New Japan. It was going to be a while until Bullet Club formed, but that's when Devitt joined the fray here. He'll come up a lot more in the podcast to follow. In May, Brock Lesnar defended the IWGP Heavyweight Championship against Giant Bernard, of course, having won the New Japan Cup and earning this title shot. And this was the first American versus American title match in New Japan since Vader versus Stan Hansen in 1990. So, I watched this match. I mentioned, in case people wanted to visualize this, that Lesnar does have his sword tattoo on his chest at this time. He's got red trunks and red boots. He has the third incarnation of the IWGP title around his waist. Like I said, similar to the undisputed WWF title. And he's got the same entrance. He does like his little jig. Same thing he's always had. And Bernard, by the way, which to WWF fans would be known as A-Train or Albert, he's got these, I'm sorry to say, terrible tribal tattoos, like right across his chest and his upper arms, his shoulders. That happened. That he had those. I don't know if he ever had those in WWF. I don't know if that was something he got in Japan or in between. I think it might have been in between. But in any case, he begins this match with Chono and Tenzan in his corner. And Bernard is the bigger man. Actually, quite significantly larger than Brock Lesnar, at least according to the tail of the tape before the match. He's 5 centimeters taller, so that's not too much. But he's 16 kilos heavier, I believe. Let's see. Something's missing here. Hold on. There it is. Yeah, 16 kilos. So that's like a featherweight in the UFC fighting a middleweight. It's a big gap. I mean, heavyweight, in fairness, there are gaps. Maybe not that much, but yeah, well, that would happen, I guess. But yeah, Bernard, I mean, he plays the big man in this match. He's resistant to Lesnar's lariats early. Um, I'm not going to go through the whole match. I've already... I expected this whole podcast to be 30 minutes. I'm already there. Look, it was actually one of Lesnar's better matches in New Japan. And it ends with the verdict. Lesnar retains. I also, before leaving May, will mention that Tai Chi, he made his first New Japan appearance at this time in 2006 in May. But he didn't join New Japan properly until 2009, and he was all over the place. I mean, he started in All Japan back in 2002, so he'd spent some time at TNA. He went to CMLL for a time. Yeah, he wasn't a New Japan regular for a while, but that was his debut for the company. Then in June, we have... well, actually, the only note I have here is that Tanahashi vacates the Under 30 Openweight Championship because he wants to, well, first of all, because he's 29 years old. Second of all, because he wants to focus on the Heavyweight Championship. And that was the last of that title, by the way, the Under 30 Openweight Championship. That was it. No one else won it after that. I believe Tanahashi and Nakamura were the only champions in the time it lasted, which was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, something like that. I suppose you could say it was the precursor to the Never Openweight title. I think that's fair to say, actually, because when the Never Openweight title began, it was really like a juniors... Sorry, not a junior. That's not specific enough. Not a cruiserweight title. More like actually a youngster title. I'll get into that when it comes about. I'll go through the details of how the Never title came about. But anyway, in July, we had... this is interesting, actually. An interim tag team title was created. So that's not something that happens a lot. So the champions were Tenzan and Chono, but they decided they didn't want to tag together anymore. And I think, I don't know exactly, but I feel like part of this was that Chono was really against, for whatever reason, he was really against Choshu being Booker. So I don't know if that had something to do with this, although, I mean, he did stay with the company for a little while longer, so maybe not. Maybe I'm getting worked here by the dirt sheets. But whatever the case was, Choten, as they were collectively known, they they just weren't defending the titles together. So this interim title was created, and it was a match between Togi Makabe and his partner. So a match of Makabe and Shiro Koshinaka, and they defeated Bernard and Travis Tomko in a tournament final to win the interim tag team championships. So a couple of new names there, at least in terms of this podcast. So Shiro Koshinaka, he was with All Japan in the early 80s. He joined New Japan in the mid 80s and stuck with them all the way through till like the mid 2000s. He is probably best known as the first IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion, which he won in 86. And he's also been multiple time tag team champion with Keiji Muto, Tenryu, and Sasaki. And the other new name there was Bernard's partner, Travis Tomko, who was also with WWE previously. He made his debut for New Japan the day before this. So this was on the 2nd of July. So he debuted on the 1st of July. He instantly aligned himself with Bernard, and they would have become a pretty serious tag team together. But we'll get to that. On the 15th of July, this is significant. New Japan officially stripped Brock Lesnar of the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. and announced that there would be a tournament to crown the new IWGP champion. They officially stated the reason for the stripping was that he wasn't able to return to the country to defend the title because of visa issues, but that's not true. The real reason is something to do with the contracts. New Japan just didn't have a lot of money, and they signed Lesnar to a big deal. And I think he had one match left, and they were kind of saying, "Hey, let's renew your deal for a lot less money." And he was like, "No, how about I just have this last match for the money you promised me?" And they were kind of at a stalemate. And Lesnar tells the story of being in the airport and, excuse me, Simon Inoki with a couple of big fellas kind of, confront him at the airport somewhat politely, saying, "Hey, let's how about we take that title belt from you? We'll shine it up real nice, and when you come back, it'll look real good for you." And Lesnar knew better, that was his leverage, so he had it stuffed in the bottom of his bag, and he got on the plane and left. And that was the last we would see of that third incarnation of the IWGP Championship for a while. So a couple days later, Hiroshi Tanahashi defeats Giant Bernard to win the IWGP tournament, and he is awarded the crown-shaped title, which is the one that they retired for Hashimoto. So that's kind of embarrassing that they have to take that back and be like, "Sorry, Hashimoto family, we kind of need a championship belt. We're just going to use this one." Yeah, awkward. But these two had a good match. I believe this one's on New Japan World. And you know what? I might actually go over this match in more detail. I talked about having a new software program for my recordings, and one of the upsides of this new software, when I can figure it out anyway, is that I can do commentaries. So I think this is one of the matches that I will attempt to do some commentary for. So I'm not going to go over it in too much detail here, but like I said, we've got the new champion in Hiroshi Tanahashi. So that's the first time he wins the IWGP Championship. And on that same card, by the way, there was another title change. Real Wild Child, which is Nakanishi and Omori, they beat the provisional tag champions, or the interim tag champions, Koshinaka and Makabe. So now they're the interim tag champions, but not the real champions yet. Moving on to August, the G1 Climax was a little bit different back then. There was 10 participants in 2 blocks. It only lasted between the 6th of August and the 13th of August. So in Block A, I'll actually just read the results. Let's get through this already. So in last place on 2 points was Nakanishi. Also on 2 points was Jushin Thunder Liger. Above them was Tanahashi on 4 points. Giant Bernard had 5 points. And the top of Block A was Satoshi Kojima with 7 points. On the Block B side of things, at the bottom, Yamamoto was at 0 points. Like I said, that's Yoshitatsu. Makabe got 3 points. Nagata had 4 points. Kanemoto, a junior heavyweight, big performance from him, 5 points. And at the top was Yoshihiro Tenzan at 8 points. So the semi-finals took place on the same night as the final. And both block winners went through to the final. They're both 35 years old, and they went on to have a really good match together. So Tenzan versus Kojima, former tag team partners, and a great rivalry over the time that they haven't been partners. But the crowd are kind of behind Tenzan in this one. Of course, Kojima at this time is an All Japan wrestler. They lay it in on each other. There's of course a lariat from Kojima, and the crowd are loud for that, but they get even louder when Tenzan kicks out. There's another lariat that lands, but Tenzan kicks out of that again, and there's a zombie-like look on his face, and then Tenzan counters the next lariat, attacks the arm, hits a couple of moonsaults, but Kojima then shows his own resiliency until Tenzan hits the TTD, the Tenzan Tombstone Driver, and he finally keeps Kojima down, wins the match, sends the fans into raptures, and that was a really good match. I can't remember if that's on New Japan World or not. I didn't note it back then. I started noting it later. I think when I get to my 2007 notes, I'll be able to tell you if you can go back and find it if you want to watch it. But again, this is already taking longer than I suspected. Let's move on to September. We had Nakamura returning, and he joined Chono's anti-authority stable, Black New Japan. And his first match back, he won alongside that leader, Chono, in a tag match. Has something else been missed here? Let's see. No, I suppose not. Okay, so this is when a certain event coming up was announced. A certain important event. It was an attempt to boost interest. New Japan decided to cross-promote with longtime rivals, All Japan Pro Wrestling. And I mean, of course, this wasn't as big a deal as it would have been 10 years ago, but still, it is it's a point in time. It's New Japan versus All Japan. There's also Noah involved and some freelancers. The idea is it's kind of like all the top stars from all the different promotions are in the ring together for this one event, and that is similar to a particular video game that was being produced at the time, where they had the rights to New Japan wrestlers, All Japan wrestlers, Noah wrestlers, or freelancers. So that video game was called Wrestle Kingdom. Produced by Ukes, of course, the owners of New Japan. And so because that was the idea of the video game, they decided, well, let's just call the event Wrestle Kingdom. So that was when we found out that January 4th, 2007 was to be known as Wrestle Kingdom. What we didn't know that at that time was that the name was to stick, but of course we know that now. That was in September. At the end of September, Simon Inoki officially stripped Chono and Tenzan of the titles. So I believe, yes, so Nakanishi and Omori were officially promoted to the full champions. And then we move on to October. We had Koji Kanemoto has taken the junior heavyweight title off of, I didn't note it. I assume he took it off Tiger Mask. He defeated Minoru in a over 30-minute match. Wow. And then in the heavyweight title match, Tanahashi defeated Tenzan. And I did look for this match, but I couldn't find it. They went nearly 27 minutes. Okay, November. We got the G1 Tag League Finals. So we had Chono and Nakamura defeating Tanahashi and Kanemoto. They're being known as them two together, it's Chono and Nakamura-gun. And then Giant Bernard and Travis Tomko are members of that stable as well, and they're at ringside for the final. And then I'm not going to go through this match here, but I think it's important to note, I already touched on it, I suppose, but Nakamura has definitely put on some size in his chest, in his shoulders. His back is significantly bigger. So that was part of him taking his leave there, his excursion. Because, I mean, Nakamura, he never had that excursion. He never had that normal dojo process. He just came in as a star from the start. So his excursion was really like, you're not really a star yet. Let's make a change and see if we can make you into one. But anyway, yeah, he. What happens in this one? Let's see. There's a low blow. Chono low blows Kanemoto, tags in Nakamura. Nakamura gets an armbar on Kanemoto, but Tanahashi comes in and breaks it up. And the landslide. That's right. Nakamura's move back then, he started doing this sit out, kind of like an F5, but like he turns it into a bomb that he sits out into. He calls that the landslide, and that earns the pinfall victory. He's the tournament winner. And yeah, Nakamura after the match, he kind of calls out Tanahashi on the mic. But before November's over, there was a press conference between Simon Inoki and the All Japan president, Keiji Muto. And they talk about how like the IWGP heavyweight title will be defended, the Triple Crown title will be defended, but they don't announce any matches. And then I've already explained the video game side of things. And then in December, we had the tag team championship. The Wild Child defended against Koshinaka and Makabe, who they won the titles off. Tanahashi defends against Nakamura, the heavyweight championship. I again tried to find this match, couldn't find it. It's kind of odd that they did that match beforehand, but well, let's see. What did they do for the Tokyo Dome show? Oh, of course, it was the crossover matches. But still, it seems like a waste that they did Tanahashi versus Nakamura just on December is throwaway for New Japan for a long time. It was hectic last year, but yeah. And then right at the end of the year, on Christmas Eve, in fact, Minoru won the junior heavyweight title from Kanemoto. So there you go. So the champions going into 2007, Tanahashi was in his first reign as IWGP heavyweight champion. For the junior heavyweight championship, that was Minoru's fourth reign of the juniors championship. The tag champions, that's their first reign, Nakanishi and Omori, and the junior heavyweight tag team championship, which we haven't mentioned at all really, was Gato and Jado at the time, and that's their fourth reign as well. But wow, look at that. This one went just as long as the last one, which also had been planned for 30 minutes. So, well, more than you paid for, huh? The next one I'll go over the Tokyo Dome in a bit more detail of 2007, and we'll move forward from there. I'm going to try and do things in a bit more detail from that point. I really, these two podcasts were to set everything up. Like I said, I really believe Wrestle Kingdom to be the beginning of an era. I want to cover that era, so that's what's coming next. Although, I believe, let me check here, next Saturday is New Beginning, or at least the first New Beginning. So there might be a bit of a break when it comes to these retro shows, I suppose you could call them, because I have been watching the Road 2 shows, and I'll do all of that in one. the road to shows leading up to this New Beginning show, and well, actually, that might be 2 shows. I might do a preview and a review, but whatever happens. I've also got to catch up on these strong shows. I've watched the last couple. I haven't talked about them. I think I might come back with a tiny show just reviewing those, because it's too much fun shitting on it. I've got to do it. So that's coming up too. All of that to look forward to. There's my articles as well. The last part of the Hashimoto and Ogawa story on cage-side seats. Look out for that. And more articles to come. I'm thinking I might post some matches on Reddit as well, and just try to spread this knowledge that I have, or that I think I have, of everything to do with New Japan back in these times. So I'm branching out, folks. Look out for my branches. And that's it. Let's wrap it up. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, have a good one.